Welcome to the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Francine Schertzer. Today we'll talk about Pennsylvania's minimum wage. But first, we're joined by Jackson White, State House reporter for LNP and Lancaster Online. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You wrote that State Representative Izzy Smith-Waddell is sponsoring a bill to establish an Office of New Pennsylvanians. What's the goal of this new office?
So the new office is intended to attract and retain immigrants to different cities of the third class in Pennsylvania. So cities like Lancaster, actually, who are facing population and economic decline.
What kind of services would this new office provide?
So they're supposed to help immigrants, navigate through legal services, language services, help them find housing in local areas, help them find jobs, that sort of thing. But also internally in the government, it's supposed to serve sort of as an advisor to different government agencies to adapt their own immigration policies.
What prompted the representative to offer this legislation?
So he introduced this last year, and when you talk to Representative Smith-Waddell, when you talk to Representative Smith-Waddell, he'll tell you that really it's not specifically to push back at some of the narrative at the federal level right now, but he says that is what is driving this legislation, to make it more important than ever to welcome immigrants into our communities and make sure that they feel welcome and supported in trying to, establish themselves here in the United States.
Well, your article did reference some of the national immigration policies. Do you think that national sentiment might actually provide some pushback and perhaps help this bill succeed more than it did in the prior session?
Yeah, last session it did stall in the House the Democrats' House committee that it was in. But this year, I do think that it could be pushed into the spotlight. I think House Democrats are really looking for any way that they can push back at the GOP agenda and some of the federal policies that we're seeing out of the Trump administration. And I think this could just be one avenue to sort of to make that fight here in Pennsylvania.
The representative talked a little bit about some of the benefits of welcoming immigrants to Pennsylvania. What kind of data did he cite to support that?
Yeah, so he was saying, I think it's about 7% of Pennsylvania's population are immigrants, and that they drive about $3.3 billion in state tax revenue. So really, that is just some of the more the quantitative reasoning on his behalf, pushing those numbers, trying to say, look, this benefits everybody here in Pennsylvania to attract and retain immigrants. It could really boost our economy to do that.
What happened to this bill when it was offered last session?
It stalled in a House committee, but this year I do think that it could be pushed at least through the House. Talking to the leadership, neither House Democrat leader, Matt Bradford, wanted to comment, but neither did Senate Republican leader Joe Pittman when I asked if he would support the legislation. So it's unclear what will happen this year, but I do think it could be brought to the House floor this year.
Why do you think that neither leader of the Senate or House commented or provided any idea of whether or not they support this?
I think immigration is a hot topic right now. I think both parties are still trying to navigate exactly what it is that they want to do. I know, so Izzy's Representative Smith-Waddell's big push for this legislation is that he wants to boost the state's population, and that's something that Senate Republicans have really pushed for in the past couple of years. So I think Senator Pittman, I don't want to put words in his mouth or anything, of course, but I don't think that he wanted to get caught up in maybe contradicting himself if he doesn't want to support this legislation throughout the year, or him and Senate Republicans want to do that. And I think House Democrats are still trying to figure out how they want to address some of these issues that maybe Republicans and President Donald Trump saw a lot of success through in last year's presidential election.
Who is vocally supporting this bill?
Representative Smith-Waddell, obviously, he has the backing of a couple of House Democrats on his side. It did see last year the representative who chairs the committee, I can't quite remember her name off the top of my head, but she co-sponsored the legislation last session. I didn't see her name attached to it yet. And I think it is important to state that the bill isn't introduced yet. Representative Smith-Waddell said that he's going to be doing that by the end of this month. But lawmakers are back in the Capitol this week, both chambers. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly this moves, if it does move through sometime this spring.
Jackson White, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
No, thank you for having me.
More of the PCN Capitol Preview after this short break.
Tuesday night on PCN.
Prior to this, when people did archaeology, it was usually just a small number of individuals, usually funded by East Coast institutions, and primarily in unique areas like the American Southwest, or actually mostly outside of the country. And so with New Deal archaeology, you had archaeology done everywhere.
PCN Sports is proud to bring you live coverage of the 2025 PIAA Basketball Championships. Watch the madness this March as Pennsylvania top high school boys and girls teams compete live March 27th through the 29th. See 12 championship games from the opening tip to the final buzzer. Watch it all on PCN or stream with PCN Select. Learn more at PCNTV.com. PCN is Pennsylvania Sports.
PCN Civics 101 provides free online educational tools to help students learn about state government. Watch interviews with public officials, tour the state capitol, or learn how to run for office with a gallery of free on-demand videos. Teachers' resources include classroom tools and a guide to incorporate Civics 101 into your lessons. The Civics 101 interactive video game keeps kids engaged and interested in learning about Pennsylvania government. Go to PCNTV.com to start learning today.
Can't get enough of the Pennsylvania Farm Show? PCN has what you need. With PCN Select, you can relive the excitement of events, find free and exclusive content, or catch something you missed while you were there. With PCN Select, the Pennsylvania Farm Show never ends. Go to PCNTV.com to learn more. PCN is everything Pennsylvania. After a great victory over Union forces in June 1863, Robert E. Lee marches his army to Pennsylvania. The advancing Confederates clash with General Meade's Union Army at Gettysburg, beginning the most famous battle of the Civil War. Explore our nation's past and the Gettysburg battlefield with the Gettysburg Collection. Become a member to stream the library online. Learn more at gettysburgcollection.com. PCN is Pennsylvania history and culture. From the founding of our nation to the struggle for freedom and equality. Listen to the words of authors as they discuss Pennsylvania and the people, places, and events that relate to the Commonwealth. Celebrate our diversity, embrace the past as we look to the future, and be a part of building our nation. PCN is Pennsylvania history and culture.
Welcome back. Our guest today serves on the House Labor and Industry Committee. I'd like to welcome Representative Aaron Bernstine. 21 other states have raised the minimum wage in 2025. This is the 11th year in a row that a sitting governor has called for this in Pennsylvania. Why has this been such a difficult, lingering issue in the State General Assembly?
Well, I think what makes the most sense is to look at the statistics and the data behind a situation like this. So we know that currently across Pennsylvania, about 2% of those who are working earn the minimum wage or below minimum wage. And that below minimum wage is typically food servers, bartenders, folks like that, right? People that receive tips. So if you really throw out, they're about 50% of that 2%, right? So now you have 1% of people, because people that are servers of food, they don't actually make minimum wage. In fact, many make a very great living in an honorable profession. So now you're back at that 1%. Of that 1%, over 85% don't have children. So I think, why does it matter if they don't have children? Well, a couple things. Number one, those are folks that are typically very young, right? It's your students, it's people that are coming back for college, and the vast majority of the remaining of that 1% are doing so because they're working in a nonprofit or something that they truly believe in. So really what this is a much ado about nothing. And I'll share with you why the Democrats are so passionate about this in just a moment. But really what we've seen with the minimum wage is this. and you know this, just down the road, I had to get gas this morning at Sheetz. And when I got gas this morning at Sheetz, they're hiring for $18 to $20 an hour. People that are earning minimum wage are earning minimum wage because they're choosing to do so, not because there aren't other opportunities out there. The real reason why Democrats are trying to raise the minimum wage and do this is many of their union bosses, the unions have agreements that are based on what the minimum wage is. It will drive up the costs of every single thing that we do at the local government level, specifically school districts. We know one of the hardest things for people in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to deal with is property taxes. I watch your show often, and I know that we hear about it all the time. Property taxes, property taxes, property taxes. Well, Democrats are doing everything they can do to increase the minimum wage because many of the wages for their unions, the public sector unions that we as taxpayers pay for, you and I, that's actually going, and they're making their contractual agreements based off of a minimum wage. Go look at who those campaign contributions went to. This is political payback, and this is about people trying to reline their pockets with taxpayer money.
So what would the average Pennsylvanian see as an impact if the minimum wage were to increase?
So what you would see is, and let me give you a specific example, XYZ school district in a certain county, right? Their union contract is maybe based off of what minimum wage is. So it would say X amount of dollars over minimum wage. Well, you would have an extreme increase in the wages of somebody maybe that's making $25 an hour, right? And they'll say, hey, it needs to be X amount of dollars over minimum wage or X amount of percent over minimum wage. So there would be a dramatic increase with that. Increased costs in school districts means school districts need to raise taxes. As a result, this is about a bill. Democrats don't care if your property taxes go up. Democrats don't care if your taxes go up. This is all about trying to pay back their public sector union friends.
How do you determine what the rate should be? As you mentioned, there are some, what would have been considered a typical minimum wage job, like the fast food places or the gas stations, that are paying well above $7.25 or $7.50 an hour. So how do you determine what the right rate should be to set the minimum wage?
Well, here's where I think it makes sense. The wages are already increasing. And the reason that wages have increased is people have a skill set, people need an employee, so you let the free market do the work. And we've seen the free market has done this work. That's why you can make $18 to $20 an hour down the road at Sheetz.
What other policies would you like to see put in place to help people that are making a lower rate?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and we just saw this, I'm not sure if you were aware, but this last week they tried to pass, Democrats passed out of our committee, Labor and Industry Committee. It'll soon be going before the entire House of Representatives. A bill that talks about family medical leave, right? Now, I think everybody should have that opportunity. But let's be real clear about what this is. This would be the largest tax increase in the history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Democrats just passed the largest tax increase, House Democrats, in the history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It would be a 33% increase in your personal income tax rate. The issue isn't the matter of what people are making, it's what we're taking. And government continues to take from people, and they continue to raise taxes, they continue to do every single thing they can do in order to increase spending. And this is why the Republican caucus and myself, I'm a founding member of the Freedom Caucus, we consistently stand up against these tyrannical acts.
Is there any evidence to prove that either businesses or employees themselves are crossing state lines to work in other states where the minimum wage might be more?
We haven't seen that at all, and that would be a huge issue if that were the case. But once again, why would you need to go across state lines to work somewhere when you can make $18 to $20 an hour here? The other thing is this. We've invested a great deal of time, energy, and money into workforce development, making sure that people are trained for this economy. Being trained for this economy is significantly different. I'm 40 years old. It's even significantly different than it was. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I graduated college, I guess, 18 years ago or so. It's a very different economy. And the different economy is you no longer need to go to a four-year institution in order to be trained and do a great job in the things we're doing. So that's absolutely an avenue to help people. But I want to be very, very clear. We know statistically that people that are earning true minimum wage, and by the way, Democrats continue to lump in food service workers with this, food service tipped workers with this. I know plenty of folks that are bartenders is their full-time jobs who make a great deal of money. We are not talking about folks like that. That's not, but they'll lump them in so their statistics look better. We know that a very, very, very small amount of people are earning minimum wage unless they choose to earn minimum wage. And I'll tell you this, I have 65,000 constituents. I call them my bosses, right? I say I have 65,000 bosses. I'm a strong believer in this. Put your money where your mouth is. If anyone in my district is earning minimum wage and is unable to find a job earning more than minimum wage, and they can pass a drug test and they'll show up for work, I will guarantee you, I will connect you with a variety of employers that they will be very more than happy to pay you more than minimum wage, and significantly more at that.
Is the minimum wage intended to be self-sustaining?
It's not. And the reason it's not intended to be self-sustaining, we see that as we look at that. Once again, 2% of all Pennsylvania workers, 1% of those are tipped employees. We know that nearly none of them actually have children and are trying to, so it's a young thing, right? But even those young students that are doing so, the ones that are making minimum wage are often doing it for experience in a specific field of their choice. The vast majority that are doing it to make money are earning significantly more than that.
Is there any correlation between the rate of pay and an employer's ability to maintain staff or turnover, things like that?
Well, of course, and that's what the free market in itself does. So we know that if I'm working at a place, let me give you a different example. So I previously worked at a place called Busy Beaver. It was a hardware store, right? Lowe's moved in next door to Busy Beaver. Busy Beaver was paying me a certain rate. I was able to go get a raise at Lowe's. Guess I was 16, 17 years old. I went over to Lowe's and worked. That's great. That's great for the economy. That's great for job producers. That's great for employees, most importantly, who then are able to put more money in their pocket. But once again, they're not able to keep money in their pocket because Democrats in Harrisburg continue to work to try to raise taxes on hardworking Pennsylvanians. I really wish these Democrats in Harrisburg, right down the road at the Capitol building, I really wish they would focus a whole lot less on what people are trying to make for political purposes and more on letting them keep more of their money, because I know that people know what's best for their pocketbooks.
If the minimum wage is increased, would that lessen the need for services through DHS, through the Department of Human Services?
Well, no, because the individuals are not on those. And once again, you have your food service workers, the 1% of total folks who are tipped. The vast majority of them, others, are students that are working at that. This is really not an issue with that. And once again, if we're actually concerned, it's important that we start to be truthful. And we've seen truthful come out of the White House. We've seen Republicans are trying to expose the numerous massive spending things that are happening with DOGE. If we're going to be honest about what we're talking about here, it's this. The Democrats continue to put blockades in place to make sure that people don't have to go to work, that are able-bodied individuals. Medicaid's a great example of that. We've saw people lose their minds because all of a sudden we're saying, hey, guess what? If you're able to work and you're able-bodied and you're young enough to work, right, then you should be seeking work or working. Democrats lost their mind and they called it cuts to Medicaid, right? It's not cuts to Medicaid. It's making sure that those who need it the most can have it. And I'm extremely compassionate about this. My aunt, who passed away a couple years ago, had multiple sclerosis. She was bedridden for 20-some years of her life. Those are people that we should absolutely take care of. But the guy down the street with his Obama phone and really nice TV, okay, that is consistently on Medicaid and has been on Medicaid his entire life just because he doesn't feel like going to work, those are the things we have to go after. And here's why. It's not fair to two groups of people. It's not fair to the people that are rowing the boat in this economy and working their tails off to support their families. And also, it's not fair to those that actually need the assistance and need the help, and the elderly that can't work, and the people that actually have real issues. So it's not fair to either one of those. I wish Democrats stuck up for people that worked hard every day and paid their bills.
Now, from the perspective of a small business owner, what impact would a minimum wage have on small businesses? Minimal.
I think we have to get away from that because we know that small businesses are not paying that rate. It really is a non-issue with that. This is a scam that Democrats in Harrisburg are putting in place. And they're putting this in place because of this reason. It's for their union bosses and their public sector unions that funnel millions and millions and millions of dollars back into their campaign coffers. That's what this is about. This is about campaign promises, and this is about shady deals that happen in back rooms.
What historically does data tell us about what a minimum wage does in terms of having an impact on jobs?
Well, what we've seen is, historically, we've seen that it has a negative impact on jobs. But the data tells us that's not the case in this situation anymore. The reason it's not the case in this situation anymore, people are already paying significantly more than minimum wage. So many of those studies were done multiple years ago, or they were done with extreme bumps in minimum wage. $20. There's cities out in California that have $25 minimum wage. That's when you get an extreme change and you have an issue with the economy. That's not the situation with this. This is about protecting their friends who give them campaign money.
Roughly about 5 years ago this month, the coronavirus impacted Pennsylvania as well as our nation and the world. There were a lot of impacts specifically on small businesses, closures, and so forth. Do you think that the minimum wage still has an impact on that argument of whether or not these small businesses in particular are making their way back to prosperity?
I don't. And the reason why is, once again, I hate to keep repeating the same thing, but people are already paying more than minimum wage. If you earn minimum wage, you're typically a student that wanted to do something in a particular field. Oftentimes, by the way, jobs they're not even qualified for, but businesses are saying, here, come here, we'll teach you, you can train here, we'll let you learn here and do those things. I'll give you a great example. There's a student who is in high school, okay? And he works, there's a technology company in my district, and he makes minimum wage there, okay? He basically sits around and watches people do things because he's interested in learning it and doing those. Those are the people that are earning minimum wage. The fact that people say it's going to hurt it's not. And the reason it wouldn't hurt small businesses, and the reason and Republicans need to get away from that, because it's just not true, right? The truth matters in politics. And for some reason, politicians think if they say the same thing that's untrue over and over again, that it becomes accurate and people will start to pay attention. That's not true, and we know that's not true. The issue is this. The change in the minimum wage is a handout to their public sector unions. That's what this is about. That's what it's always been about, and that's what we need to consistently talk about. And by the way, I'll give you a great example of that. Josh Shapiro, or Little Obama as I call him, because he likes to go up there and talk like he's Barack Obama. Same tone and everything. It's kind of an entertaining ordeal. Little Obama goes up and talks about this all the time. Go look at Josh Shapiro's campaign contributions. Josh Shapiro's campaign contributions are primarily from two things. One, they're from ultra left-wing liberals from California. Okay, it's the George Soros group, excuse me, the George Soros team that does this. Secondarily, it's public sector unions. That's what this is about. This is about doing everything they can do to continue to fill their campaign coffers. And if this happens, I'll bet you a dime to a dollar that we will see massive influx of campaign contributions directly to the people who voted for this.
How do you respond to the argument that if the minimum wage were to increase, the economy would see a boost because there'd be a growth in consumer spending?
There's just not. Because a couple things would happen. Number one, the food service is completely irrelevant with that, right? Because fine, if you increase the tip wage, it doesn't really matter. Businesses are just going to say, okay, fine, here's your tip. That's a minimal issue. Secondarily, those that are earning minimum wage or doing those types of things, oftentimes they're just going to transition them to an intern or whatever type of thing it would be. People that are working in a life-sustaining job, they're not earning minimum wage.
You'd referred earlier to some tipped employees and how the minimum wage is a little bit different for them. Can you explain that situation and how minimum wage would impact what they make? Yeah,
so interestingly enough, what you have is, so I'm just going to use a bartender as an example, if that's okay. So bartender makes $3 an hour. I think it's $2.18 for tipped employees, but I'm just going to say $3 an hour. Most of the time, people put it to a specific dollar amount because it's easier to do payroll. That's how much it doesn't matter. They then take their tip money and often earn significantly more than that, way more than the $7.50 an hour. So, or $7.25 an hour. So. There would really be no change with that. Democrats have tried to say, here, we'll increase that to $4. Doesn't matter. Okay, it's a non-issue. But But once again, this is not about what people say it is. This is about handouts, handouts, handouts for those that scratch their back in their last campaigns.
Now, how many businesses in Pennsylvania currently pay the minimum wage?
Geez, I don't know that statistic. I'm sorry, but I do know the number of people that earn minimum wage. It's 2% of all wage earners. 1% of those are in the service industry, meaning those that receive tips. And the other 1% are those that typically choose to do so because they're working at a small nonprofit. And that's just where they choose to do. And I'll give you a great example of that. I have friends of mine who aren't a breadwinner of a family, and they say, here, I'm going to go work down at this place, and here's a couple bucks or whatever it is. We have a great nonprofit that actually does some things with clothing in Elwood City. We're helping people get jobs, right, and having good. They pay folks there minimum wage. When I say they pay folks there, it's really nice people that go there, then they give them a couple bucks. I'm told oftentimes they don't even cash their checks. They're just there to do good work. And by the way, these are the people that are really helping our, not the economy necessarily, but really just helping people in the community each and every day make an impact.
Last year, the State House passed a bill to increase the minimum wage by $15 an hour. It didn't go through the Senate. Do you have any sense of what the temperature is among the General Assembly this session? Yeah,
I think the temperature in the General Assembly is it depends what happens with this budget. Remember, it wasn't last year, but the year before on the Pennsylvania budget where Governor Shapiro actually lied when he said that he was for school choice and he was for the legislation that was passed. And then when it got to him and after it was passed, he vetoed that particular part. So there's a real trust issue in this town. And the trust issue is because one side lied. It wasn't because something changed or anything else. They said, yes, I'm for this, and then the governor backed off away from it. So, I think we have a trust issue in Harrisburg. We'll see where this lands, and we'll see what this becomes. But everything's on the table in terms of doing some things. But I will share with you what's never on the table for me. And what is never on the table for me is tax increases on hardworking people, just like the Democrats and the labor and industry voted to pass the largest tax increase in the history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a $4.3 billion tax increase, or a 32% increase in overall spending.
What minimum wage legislation is currently in the General Assembly right now?
There's quite a few. There's quite a few that are out there. There's one for 15. I believe I just saw one that came for 20. And so, that's where we're at this moment.
I'd like to also welcome to our program now Representative Jason Dawkins, Representative chairs the House Labor and Industry Committee. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Representative Bernstine's been with us for roughly the last half hour. We've been talking a little bit about proposals to increase the minimum wage in Pennsylvania. Why do you see the minimum wage as something that should be increased?
Well, it doesn't take long to look at the current economy and see that we need more wages for our workers. We've been talking about this increase for years. It's long past due that we actually do something for working class families in Pennsylvania. Currently, the minimum wage is $7.25. It's been that way since 2009. I think it's long past due that we give these folks an opportunity to earn a little bit more money in their paycheck, especially when industry has told me time after time that they have already come to the terms that we need to be able to pay folks more money. And even going as far to say is that they are already paying folks far above that amount. If that is in fact the case, why shouldn't we codify that in the state to make it law?
Well, I think what the representative just said, I think he said two things that were very interesting. Number one, he said people are already paying more than that. We know that. We've actually talked about this before the good representative was able to join us. But the fact that was really interesting is Representative Dawkins just said, hey, people should have more money in their paychecks, right? What I find really interesting that is Representative Dawkins and his team just last week voted for the largest tax increase in the history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, with a $4.2 billion tax increase or a 32% increase on people's wages. So, Representative, I appreciate the fact that you want people to have money, but unfortunately, if you're going to increase their wages, that doesn't mean that you should be taking every single piece of those wages back.
Can I respond?
Of course, please.
Yeah, so what he's referring to, if I'm correct, is the Family Care Act. It's something that we've all been talking about. It's been talked about on Washington. It's been talked about in many state houses. This is something that we all know that we need to do for our families. We enjoy the privilege of having it, so our workers should also have the option of doing so. We've came up with different proposals, and we even asked our Republican counterparts, what can you suggest that we do to get this thing done? I posed the question. There's many workers currently right now, especially in some of the more vulnerable positions of taking care of our elderly. They do not get the benefit of making more than $15 an hour. They don't get the benefit of making more than $12 an hour. It is long past due for those individuals. I'm not saying everyone in the current industry is making less than $15, but we shouldn't be leaving anyone behind. This is America. This is supposed to be the greatest country in the land. We should start acting like it and putting our money where our mouth is. Last I checked, the representative receives a COLA every single year. I don't believe he's been turning back his COLA to give back to the working class folks in his district. This is an opportunity for him to stand up for those folks and show them that he cares.
Well, I think that's very good. And in fact, what I have done with the COLA each and every year is I have provided that to separate charities or different things. In fact, last year we did scholarships for teachers that came up with new and innovative and creative ideas. So the difference is this. Should government determine the way that every business operates and handles things? Or, as businesses have already done, like the representatives shared, they have already taken the steps in order to pay people more money. We know that 2% of people earn minimum wage or less, and those minimum wage or less individuals are people that that are in the food service industry, right? Those that are tipped employees. We know that they make significantly more than that. And people were able to go out and get those jobs at $18, $20 an hour just down the road, as we saw at Sheetz, as I was talking about earlier. Government doesn't need to do that. And the reason that government doesn't need to do that is the private businesses and the private sector has already done so. Once again, this is not about jobs. This is not about minimum wage. This is oftentimes about public sector union contracts that fund the campaigns of Democrats, and specifically left-wing Democrats, specifically Governor Shapiro, by the way. Their union contracts are often tied to minimum wage. This is a handout for their political friends and more things that can be done in order to fill their campaign coffers. We've seen it before, and we're going to see it moving forward.
Representative Dawkins, we'll come back to you in just a moment. We're going to take a very brief break just so we can look at what PCN will be covering this week. Tomorrow on the PCN Capitol Preview, the state government is considering a new source of revenue in the form of a tax on skills games. Representative Patrick Harkins, Majority Chair of the House Gaming Oversight Committee, and Representative Danilo Burgos, Majority Chair of the House Consumer Protection and Technology Committee, will be here tomorrow morning live at 9 a.m. On the Issues has an update on the avian flu with Dr. Lisa Murphy, toxicology professor at the University of Pennsylvania's School of Veterinary Medicine. She'll be here Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Right after that, we'll take a look at the LGBTQ youth agenda with Jason Landau Goodman from the Pennsylvania Youth Congress. He's joining us Wednesday at 7:30. Lots of PIAA basketball championship action on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of this week. Too many games to list here, but suffice it to say, it all gets started at 12 noon on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. You can find out who's on the court and at what time by visiting PCNTV.com. The public affairs coverage you watch on PCN is now free online. Go to PCNTV.com and check out our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers like you. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. We're joined by members of the House Labor and Industry Committee, Representative Aaron Bernstine, Representative Jason Dawkins. Representative Dawkins, I want to come back to you. One thing that we had talked about before you joined our program this morning is who are the minimum wage workers? What do you think?
So to that point, let me just go back quickly and just address the one thing that we keep on missing. If we're saying industry is currently paying it, what harm could it possibly do to codify that in the law? For one. Secondly, I think it's very rich when we talk about what business freedom looks like, but then we have these measures around DEI and tell business exactly how they should be able to run. I find that to be two opposite positions. Either you're going to give the autonomy to the business to be able to make its own choices and be able to measure its own successes and see exactly what's the best chart forward for those businesses, or you're not. I think we got to take politics out of this altogether. I'm not here to disparage this member or other members of his party. That's not why we're here. We should be talking about the facts and policies that drive this economy forward. Now let's get to the question. What workers are we talking about? The workers we're talking about is the ones that live in all of our districts across this Pennsylvania. We're talking about folks who are security guards. We're talking about folks who take care of the elderly. We're talking about tip wage workers. We're talking about anyone who can't make the actual ends meet at the end of the month. That's who we're talking about. We've had this conversation around grocery prices since last year. All I heard was grocery prices, the economy. We got to do more for workers. And some way, somehow, we go into a new year and no one's talking about these things any longer. I wonder what changed. This is politics all the time that we always see. Folks talk a big game, but when it's time for them to be in the power and to drive the actual narrative, it never happens. Let's be clear. Democrats had this opportunity to be in charge for 2 years. And in 2 years, we have made more progress and passed more legislation that deals with working class people in this Commonwealth in the last 12 years under the previous administrations. This is our time to come together and work collectively for the people who have voted for us to be in these offices.
Is there data to confirm or deny the theory that minimum wage workers are typically teenagers at their first jobs?
One more time, I'll blare it out.
Is there data that can confirm or deny the theory that the minimum wage workers are typically teenagers at their first jobs?
No, if you look at the current data that's currently out there, you'll see there's a wide range of folks who currently make a minimum wage. It's not just the folks who are teenagers who make a minimum wage. There's folks who may have been out of the workplace for a long time, taking care of families, raising families, and then economically things have changed and they have to go back into the workforce. They may not be equipped with all the skills currently right now in the workforce because we are moving forward as a world in terms of our technology, but Pennsylvania has been kind of stuck stagnant because we are too busy fighting over political gamemanship versus figuring out how do we prepare our workers for the future. This is what the Democrats have been trying to do for a very long time, is talk about how do we grow this economy? How do we grow PA? How do we do this in a responsible way that we're investing back into communities, investing back into people? We have the opportunity to do so. It does not have to end here where we have the ability to make these changes and we choose not to do anything because it's politically astute for the other party. That is not what we signed up for. That's not what I signed up for, which is why we're going to keep moving forward and trying to get these things done. I believe we're going to get minimum wage done this year, and I'm hoping that my colleague on the other side will join me in this fight to make sure that happens.
Well, what we've seen is this, and I think that the good chairman, who, by the way, we actually have a committee meeting right after this, so I'll be going and seeing him there. But what we've seen is this. We have seen that the Democrats, and he said that they were the most productive. Governor Shapiro actually signed the least amount of laws in the history of any governor in the last 100 years or something. It's absolutely outrageous. Secondarily, I found it really interesting right before you came back to us and we were on our break. And it was just a here we go again, another groundhog moment. And what I mean by that was it was another tax that you were talking about. The Democrats are going to come on, I believe, tomorrow, Representative Burgos and the senator, where another tax proposed by Democrats. You don't tax people to prosperity. And no matter how much money you give them, when you consistently think that you need to raise taxes on people, like the largest increase in taxes in the history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that was just passed out of our committee, or another huge tax on skill games that, by the way, is not going to hurt anyone else. The only thing it's going to hurt is small businesses where they exist, right? So they're going to have less employees because they're going to make less money. And also, probably more important than that, are nonprofits. These are all tax increases. They're supported by the Democratic Party. To me, let's let the free market work. The free market is working. People are having more money. And then let's also not keep reaching into individuals' pockets and taking that cash out of their pocket. I know that people know what's best to do with their money, and I wish that Democrats would come on board and view that way as well.
Representative Dawkins?
We clearly live in two alternate different universes, because when he says people are doing well today, I think he may want to take a walk around this Commonwealth and actually talk to real people. I can assure you, folks are not doing better today as they were doing yesterday. That is a falsehood. We need to not even carry that message to term. We should be talking about the things that I just proposed. What you did not hear from the good gentleman is any proposals that he has to actually bring us into prosperity. Because if my memory serves me correctly, it was 12 years under that leadership that did not do that. We've seen wages go down. We have seen folks struggle, unemployment rise up and down, and we've seen industry go away. It is time for us to get serious about this issue. And again, we have a pathway forward. I'm not proposing to say that everything that we propose from the Democratic side is perfect, but let's be clear. Let's talk facts. This is a bipartisan, bicameral legislature, which means we have the House that is controlled by the Democrats, and we have a Senate that's controlled by Republicans. What he failed to mention when he talked about the lowest amount of bills signed, he failed to say how many bills came out of the House, which is controlled by the Democrats, and sent to the Senate that went to the Senate and did not advance. That's a total different argument. But he did not say that we had a record number of bills that came out of the House in the first time in the 12 years that we sent that many bills to the Senate and they sat there idle doing nothing. So we have to take accountability to each side of this building, that you have a House side that's controlled by Democrats and a Republican side controlled by the Senate. The Senate did not advance those bills. The Senate did not, in my opinion, do all they could do to kind of get those bills to the governor's desk. We have to be able to talk facts, and we have to give folks the full picture and allow them to make those decisions. But we need to make sure that we're telling the story correctly, so that way we're not misleading or miseducating the folks of Pennsylvania.
Does the state's set minimum wage impact that state's ability to be competitive, both from a labor as well as business perspective?
I do not believe so. If you look at all the surrounding counties and states who have done this already, we have seen growth in those areas. I challenge anyone who can look at the actual the business commerce departments and data reports. You will see a direct correlation. When you pay workers more and fairly, they are more likely to stay in that job, more likely to do the job at a higher rate. They're more likely to be retooled to do bigger and better jobs in the future. But we have to stop this narrative that if we continue to leave it up to free market, that free market won't do what free market has always done, and that is to keep profits in their pockets and not pass them on to the workers. That trickle-down economics theory does not work. We have had many years of experience to see that just does not work. We need to be able to make those investments, show that we are willing to make those investments. I believe there's a partner in our business community to do these things, but they're looking for us to stop bickering in this building and come up with a strategy and a pathway forward. We're here to lead, and we need to start leading this conversation.
So, yeah, I would say to the good representative, I think he said a thing that, and we talked about this a little bit before, the fact that an increase in minimum wage would destroy small business, I think is just inaccurate, because they're already paying that. But here's what it would destroy, and here's what it could hurt. It could hurt the fact of people going to learn different skills. It could harm our small nonprofits of people that are choosing to work for that amount of money. Those are the things that it could hurt. But the fact of Representative Dawkins, I absolutely agree, because we know that businesses are already paying that $18 and $20 an hour right down here at Sheetz, fast food places. That piece isn't a huge problem. What we're going to do is we're going to harm people. We're going to harm young people that are trying to learn a skill in order to join the workforce. But most importantly, I don't know why we're not talking about this. This is another example, because these public sector union agreements are tied to minimum wage. And when that happens, you're going to have these public sector unions that receive an increase. Who pays for that? The three of us pay for that through our taxes. We're going to have it then, once again, another tax increase on top of people, even in addition, because that's going to be our school taxes. That's going to be the local taxes. This is what this is really about. This is about taking money from taxpayers and, in turn, through legislation, putting it into campaign coffers. We've seen it happen before, and if you go look at Governor Shapiro's campaign finance reports, you will see that is where he gets nearly all of his money, with the exception of that money that comes from left-wing crazies in California. Those are the two groups that happens, and that's why Governor Shapiro is so passionate about this. I wish, when we talk about being efficient with money and those types of things, as you know, we spend $22,000 per student K through 12. That means a classroom of 25 is $550,000. But here's the problem, and this is an issue in Harrisburg. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. Because what's going to happen is they're going to throw more money at a failing system. In a system where there's a school district right next to my legislative district where 14% of kids can read and write, and they spend $23,000 a year. Okay, it's that bad. But we're going to consistently throw money at a problem, at an issue. And why are we going to consistently do that? Once again, let's be real honest about what we're talking about. Let's go back to the campaign finance reports. Let's look up PSEA, Pennsylvania State Education Association, the largest terrorist group in the history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Let's look at them, and then let's look where their campaign money goes. That's what we've seen. This is what we're talking about each and every day. Republicans are going to brag about it. Democrats are going to brag about it. And who's going to hurt? The taxpayers and young kids.
Representative Dawkins.
So again, we going right back to the politics, which again, the good representative refuses to acknowledge that he does not have a plan. Here's a proposal for you. You mentioned small business and small nonprofits. Did you know that we are proposing to exempt those folks? We did that in the last version of our bill. Are you saying now on live television, if those things are exempted, that you are willing to vote for minimum wage in Pennsylvania?
Well, I think it depends on what the entire bill is. As I said before, there's nothing off the table. The only thing off the table for me is a tax increase, just like the Democrats just proposed, the largest tax increase in the history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The only thing that is off the table for me is a tax increase. Other than that, I'm willing to work on that. And the representative and I were actually personal friends as well. We get along as much as we can jab at this one. I'll see him and we'll high five each other as we walk in. But I'll tell you this. I think that there are those that are consistently putting political ambition ahead of taxpayers in Pennsylvania. And some of that has to do with minimum wage, but in general, it's a greater problem. It's not a Republican issue, it's not a Democrat issue, but it is an issue that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed quickly. I'll share with you, once again, if we're going to talk about being efficient with money and taxpayer dollars, then let's make sure that we're doing it all the way across the board.
Representative Dawkins, where is this issue in the legislative process right now? Is there a bill that's being considered as perhaps the vehicle to move this forward?
We haven't drafted and introduced the bill as of yet, because what we were trying to do is take a collective and really make sure that we're hearing from all sides, right? We believe in a joint partisan position to kind of push this bill out. We have something that we're working on. We're hoping that we get some more of our fellow colleagues on the other side to join in. I'm hearing that we have some movement in the Senate around this issue. We're just trying to come up with a number. We're just trying to come up with some of those small business concerns and some of those small nonprofit concerns. But let me say this, and I think this is always missed. When we talk about spending taxpayers' dollars, let's not assume that those who are receiving minimum wage pay is not taxpayers. They are also paying into this system. They are also entitled, in my opinion, if they're paying into a system, to be treated fairly in said system. We always have this disconnect when we talk about programs and taxpayer dollars, as if the person that's going to receive those funds are not Americans and not paying into our tax system. So these are folks who may have, starting off new in their career, or maybe retooled in another career, or just may have fell on bad times and they need a quick job. We should not treat them like third-class citizens when they are Americans. And we need to get back to treating folks like Americans.
What is the likelihood that you see minimum wage perhaps being used as a bargaining chip for some of the other initiatives being offered in the budget this year, be it skills games, recreational marijuana, perhaps some of the governor's energy plan, or even perhaps voter ID?
I believe it's absolutely in the conversation. We will be fooling ourselves if we're going through this economic downturn currently right now with all the new tariffs that's being placed on us, on American goods that we're going to be paying for as consumers. We know that households are going to see a decrease in their spending habits. They're going to see a decrease in their actual pocketbooks and wallets. We know we need to be a backstop and make sure that we are combating the bad policies that we're currently seeing out of D.C. to ensure that Pennsylvanians don't get severely hurt in this moment. So I believe this is going to be top priority for our governor and for this state to see minimum wage pass this year.
Representative Bernstine, you get the last word. Your thoughts on the likelihood of this issue moving forward?
Yeah, I'm not sure about moving forward, but I'll reiterate what Representative Dawkins says, and I think there's nothing off the table, right? To his point earlier, the good chairman's, we have a Democrat governor, we have a Democrat House by one vote. Well, technically it's even now. Democrats are highly likely to win that election. Then a Republican Senate, which is a fairly Republican Senate. It's going to take all people to come to the table to figure it out and get it together. But when we do that, we need to make sure that we're not spending more money than we have. We need to do so to make sure we're doing it responsibly.
I'd like to thank my guest, Representative Aaron Bernstine, Representative Jason Dawkins. Thank you both for joining us. Earlier, PCN spoke with Representative Jim Haddock about his legislation regarding an organ donation tax credit.
Representative Haddock, welcome to our program. Your living organ donor bill was approved by the State House Finance Committee this week. What action does this bill take?
Well, this bill gives the actual organ donor themselves up to $12,000 of a tax credit for out-of-pocket expenses when they donate an organ. And this is a good bill. It gives a little bit of an incentive. Now, at the Pennsylvania tax rate of 3.07, it truthfully is about a $369 tax credit that the people could receive as a refund of up to $12,000 in outright expenses. And the one thing, even more so than the money, is the chance of a exposure to the need of these organs in the state of Pennsylvania. So I thank you for this opportunity, Carson, to get this bill out. And maybe later on we'll go through how long it's been in the House without being moved by the Senate.
Is this the first time that you've proposed this bill?
No, I ironically, or actually, I was a freshman last session in the year's 22-23 session. And this bill was done by a former state representative by the name of John Galloway, who became a judge, and he retired, left the House. This was a bill that he actually introduced in the 21-22 session. In the 23 session, he actually introduced it, left, so now it needed another sponsor. And when he talked to me about it in the beginning, I was really shocked at how much this bill was actually needed. And Mr. Galloway had somebody in his family that was in the need of an organ transplant, and he was very knowledgeable about the system. He actually took the time as a senior legislature member to talk to me. I found it fascinating. And then when John was leaving, we had a discussion, and he asked me to continue carrying the torch for him. So I introduced it last session. It came out of the House committee, but by the time we transferred it, it was very late in the year. And unfortunately, it went over to the Senate, and I didn't have enough time to work with the senators to rally up enough muster to get it on the floor and for a vote in the Senate. So this year I started very early in the session, got it out. We had a public hearing about it, and we were glad to have that. And the committee, the first step is write the bill, and then second step is the committee. And the committee voted unanimously for it, and we did it early enough. So I have the next parts of the session in 25, 26 now to get this over to the Senate. And I do believe my leadership in the House will run it. I do believe last time it passed with bipartisan support. I will work on getting even more bipartisan support in the State House, and that'll speak volumes to the Senate. And then hopefully I'll be talking to senators and have time to solicit them and try to educate them about the need of this bill.
If the bill passes, how soon would it be implemented?
Okay, so in the bill, it's actually written as immediate. We would be able to institute it very fast and get the tax credit on the board. And the governor's office has indicated that they would be supportive of the bill.
How much?
So if it, sorry.
That's okay. How much does it currently cost a living organ donor?
Well, again, that varies. So a lot of times, and some of the organs that could be given or donated could be liver, pancreas, kidney, lungs, intestine, bone marrow, even. So one of the unknown expenses out of pocket is travel. A lot of times you have to go to a certain hospital, and you may have to go to California from Pennsylvania to have the surgery done, and also where the patient that's going to receive the organ the transplant would be done. So travel is an unknown. Time frame is unknown, and another thing is, ironically, in the state of Pennsylvania, if you're an employee and you say, I'm going to donate a kidney, use a kidney as an example, in the state of Pennsylvania, if the employer gives you paid time off, that employer receives a tax credit currently. So we're giving the businessmen that give them it's voluntarily done by the employer. So if they don't give paid time off and somebody gets docked, their time that would be earned and the pay would receive would also include. So there's a lot of variables, and we have the $12,000 cap, and they feel that is usually on the upper end of the expense. And the other interesting thing is the person that's receiving the organ, their insurance pays for the medical part of the donor. So the medical expense to the donor is taken care of by the receiving party's person's insurance. So it's out-of-pocket expense, travel, lodging, food, loss of wages, if the place of employment doesn't give them the money.
We've been speaking with Representative Jim Haddock. Thank you for your time today.
Well, I certainly thank you for your time, Carson, and getting the word out. Education's always a good thing, and there's 8,000 Pennsylvania people that are currently waiting for an organ. So you're doing them a great service by bringing this to light. Thank you so much.
That concludes today's show. The PCN Capitol Preview returns tomorrow to discuss skills games. Representative Patrick Harkins, Majority Chair of the Gaming Oversight Committee, and Representative Danilo Burgos, Majority Chair of the House Consumer Protection and Technology Committee, will both be here tomorrow starting live at 9 a.m. I'm Francine Schertzer. Thank you for watching.
Our borough communities across the Commonwealth have proven to be resilient and vital to the